call for American society. I mean, for 30 years, the perception was that manufacturing was going to be a thing of the past. It was shifting offshore. You had major companies like GE moving production to China. Motorola, which is housed in Chicago, no longer does any manufacturing in the country. And their stories dominated the business pages and public perception. And the reality is, beginning around 2000, we really did begin to have a shift in the manufacturing economy. Well, let me back up a little bit. Part of the image was created by the industrial crises we had in the 1980s and 90s. In Chicago, that's when I lost my job in a manufacturing company as the company closed, and we lost in Chicago 4,000 out of 7,000 factories during that period of time and 200,000 manufacturing jobs. And that created a public perception that this was a sector that really couldn't be viable in our society. And then you had highly publicized shifts of larger companies offshore, and there was this real shift in threat to the perception of the viability of manufacturing. But the reality is that companies that remained in Chicago and remained in the country had shifted. We'd lost our low-skilled work, and work that required little or no skills had gone offshore. But companies that were remaining there moved to higher value-added work and doing more complex, creating more complex products. And the biggest challenge they faced was finding people with the talent and skills to do the work. In my organization, we sort of recognized that possibility, and in 2001, we received a large contract with the U.S. Department of Labor to actually study that phenomenon. We partnered with the Chicago Federation of Labor and did a study on the publicly funded education system related to manufacturing in Cook County as sort of a microcosm of what was going on in the national economy. What we found in the report, and what we sort of documented, was the fact that manufacturing, despite the perception, was still viable in the Chicago economy. We still had 7,000 companies in Cook County. Their average wage was $65,000 a year when you included benefits. And these were companies that were now successfully able to compete in global markets. But the biggest challenge they faced was finding people with enough talent and skill to do the work that their production required. And a pretty significant number. For example, in each year there's a need to replace about 10,500 people in manufacturing positions in Cook County, in large part due to attrition. The baby boom was retiring, but also due to some growth. And we added up all the graduates of all the courses that could be relevant to providing this workforce. We only had about 5,000 graduates, which meant we had this irony of having really excellent, high-paying jobs going unfilled, companies unable to compete. You had in inner city communities like Austin, and I'll describe a little bit later, you had young people having no conception of what work could be outside of Walmart or McDonald's or a functioning underground economy where, in fact, personal danger was a big factor. So in this report, we documented this reality and advanced a 20-year vision of change, of how we could transform an education system as a necessary requirement for rebuilding and revitalizing American society and the Chicago economy as a vibrant manufacturing economy. And in the report, we advanced solutions that were really based on best European practice and borrowed largely from the delegation we took to Germany and Denmark during that same period of time. It was interesting that the report itself was sponsored by the Labor Federation, but the organization most interested in the report was the Illinois Manufacturers Association, which is the association which represents 4,000 manufacturing companies in the state of Illinois. It's traditionally very Republican, is traditionally very anti-labor, and fights with labor on every issue in the state legislature, and had done so for decades. But they saw in this report, issued by the labor movement, an honest recognition of the viability of manufacturing, an honest critique of the public school system, which we saw as a non-system, and a vision of reform of how this problem could actually be solved. The Illinois Manufacturers Association then chose to work with our association, and we did a summer report for them on the state of Illinois manufacturing, and then challenged them. Well, in the report, we argued that manufacturing is viable, it faces many challenges, and if the manufacturers themselves were really to embrace the high road and really reassert their commitment to the long-term development of the sector, treating people fairly, and so on and so forth, that we could create a partnership between them and labor and community and government, a partnership that would be big enough and broad enough, bipartisan enough to bring about the changes we needed in education and other aspects of of policy in Chicago. And they agreed. So in 2005, we created the Chicago Manufacturing Renaissance Council. And the purpose of the council has two purposes, or two major goals. First of all, it just asserts that we should become the global leader in making complex products. And that is the development vision of the Manufacturing Renaissance Council. And in fact, And then the other aspect of the vision is that our competitive advantage should be the social partnership that we've created between business, labor, government, and community. And and the vision of the Renaissance Council is first of all just based on the recognition that in manufacturing in general, we only have a competitive advantage in doing advanced manufacturing. We no longer have an advantage in doing low-skilled work. And so we decided just to embrace that reality. But as we thought about it, and what we talk about on a regular basis, is that advanced manufacturing is, to build this as a foundation for our society, is an enormous opportunity. First of all, advanced manufacturing is the only sector that will allow American society, or I think any society, to build a broad-based middle class, simply because of the wages. I mean, it provides the wages and the ripple effects and the multiplier effects it has in other sections of the economy. It's the only way we can build a tax base, that can support the social programs, and that's obviously an area of huge debate and discussion and strife in the United States at this point. Tom Friedman in the New York Times said we can't support our social programs unless we have at least an economy that has wages that pay on average $40 an hour, and it's only in advanced manufacturing that you can have that kind of wage structure. We also say that there's a lot of deep concern, as there has to be, around the environment. We say the only way you can solve the crisis of the environment is through advanced manufacturing. It's not going to be lawyers suing companies. It's not going to be opposition to current projects. But it's going to be advanced manufacturing developed with industrial developers and engineers developing new products and new processes that's going to restore integrity to our climate. And then third of all, in advanced manufacturing, despite the perception, work is now transformative. It's no longer, essentially as companies move to doing higher value added work, production workers have to have high levels of competency in math, and critical thinking. They need to work in teams. They need to be able to communicate effectively. And work in advanced manufacturing is now truly transformative. It creates social capital during work, as well as providing a good standard of living after work. So this is the kind of public message that Chicago Manufacturing Renaissance Council has taken out to broad-based communities, to city governments, and so on and so forth. The first project of the Renaissance Council, and again, education is central to the future of manufacturing, because without a transformation of our education system, every hope we have for rebuilding manufacturing really is an impossibility. So almost out of a practical necessity, our first project was the launching of a public high school on the west side of Chicago called Austin Polytech. It was first done in discussions with Arne Duncan, who was then the CEO of Chicago Public Schools, is now the Secretary of Education. And we said that if we created a public school that had high enough standards, provided high quality education so manufacturers were sure that the graduates of the school could have the competencies to do work in modern manufacturing, we could then attract the investment of manufacturing companies and their associations and create a unique private-public partnership around public education that would benefit everybody. So we did. We in fact launched the school in 2007. It's a public school on the west side of Chicago, and the west side of Chicago is one of the poorest communities in the city of Chicago. It has an unemployment rate of about 30. It has very high crime rates. But we chose, in fact, to go into that community to make a point. That if we're going to rebuild manufacturing, if we're going to have a recovery, it's going to include all the communities, particularly the communities that were hit the hardest by the crisis of manufacturing. In the school, we make a big point to say this is not a vocational or trade school. We say it's a school to train the leaders in all aspects of manufacturing. And we say that, first of all, because it's necessary. We do need highly skilled people, both in skilled production positions, but also in management, in ownership. There's a huge problem in small companies in Chicago based on succession in ownership, and aging owners now having the next generation to go into the business. And we need to create a whole new generation of young entrepreneurs who aspire to be owners of manufacturing companies. But we also talk about firms outside the company as part of being in a manufacturing career. We have 65 companies that are now partners for the school, which is quite extraordinary. And these are companies that typically they're small privately held companies, but their objectives is to provide, the most important objective and resource they provide for the school is the chance for our students to go and tour their companies. So our freshmen and sophomores go on extensive tours and visit a number of companies in the first part of their high school education. These companies then provide opportunities for job shadowing experiences, for internships and summer jobs. Often because they're small companies, our students will have a job shadowing experience with the owner of a company or with the lead engineer in a company, which changes their whole perspective about what's possible in manufacturing. But we also have one of our partners is John Marshall Law School. Within our curriculum, we do have a standard curriculum of math and science and English, but we also have a 4-year pre-engineering course that all students are required to take. And in that pre-engineering course, John Marshall Law School teaches a course on intellectual property rights, because you really can't be in leadership and manufacturing unless you understand IP. So we consider in our school, be a lawyer doing intellectual property rights is in fact a manufacturing career, as well as being a CNC operator, as well as being an owner of a company. And what we think this does is it provides a much broader array of career possibilities that really do excite parents and students about the possibilities of their future in manufacturing. So the most important thing I think, I'm not an educator, and actually I thought to set up a school, I thought it'd be pretty straightforward. We would arrange partnerships with companies, and we'd have a principal, and everything would be really quite easy. And in fact, working with Target Education turned out to be quite difficult and quite challenging. But because we were speaking to a real need in the economy, a real gap between high-performing manufacturing companies and their need for highly talented and educated employees, we were able to create now what is a very successful high school. And it's really given a real social face and a public face to the value of manufacturing, more so than anything I could have imagined. And then partly based because of the excitement people have around Austin Polytech, then the other aspects of the Renaissance Council, which also involves itself in post-secondary education. We're involved very much in trying to help small companies become part of the supply chain for the wind turbine sector. We're involved in providing business services for companies so they can find talented workers much faster. Because of that success, we've now created the San Francisco Bay Area Manufacturing Renaissance Council, which has the same partnership of the California Manufacturing Technology Association, your equivalent on a state level, the California Teachers Association, the California Federation of Labor, the California Space Authority that represents the aerospace industry. And that Manufacturing Renaissance Council is now underway, and we're now in discussions with the administration to actually try to replicate this on a national level. And we think it's the kind of the idea whose time has come in the United States. I think people have now realized, for 30 years we had an economy that was based really, it wasn't based on, but it was perceived to be dominated by really Wall Street, and really short-term investment and speculation and housing and every aspect of life. And that whole story has played itself out, and people now recognize that is not an adequate foundation for a complex society as the United States. And so the notion of shifting America back to its leadership and being a productive society that benefits all the citizens is something of large appeal. So that's sort of my comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions? Ideas, thoughts? I think it's fantastic a model for us to go along with.
You mentioned that you're making the shift from manufacturing to advanced manufacturing. What do you define as advanced manufacturing? Is that a shift in production processes, or is it a type of manufacturing? I'm just curious.
So our definition of advanced manufacturing is where it's high value work. It's where you have the intersection between new scientific breakthroughs through technology, through innovation. And it just means that that we no longer have the ability to compete with developing countries who have a very large supply of really low cost and relatively unskilled labor. So the work so the products are like we have a small company, Hudson Precision, that used to have 90% of this work used to be sort of commodity products.